top of the hour. Welcome everyone. We're on track C. Thank you for joining us for Manufacturing Day and our virtual conference we're having today. This has been a lot of fun, being able to get to be exposed to different ideas and different things that are going on with different manufacturing companies. So we've got GRIP6 with us here, BJ and David, and we appreciate you both being here. Why don't you guys just take a few minutes and give an overall introduction to yourselves and to the company.
Okay. Want to start?
Yeah. I'm David Burton. I am the director of marketing for GRIP6, as well as General Counsel and a co-owner.
Now we're going to unpackage that here a little bit, because that's not a very typical thing to have. It's not. The attorney and the marketing person be the same person. So we'll unpackage that. But nevertheless,
absolutely,
you wear both hats.
Yeah. And I've been at GRIP6 since the beginning. We started in 2014 as a Kickstarter company.
Yeah.
And I've been at least on the sidelines since that time, kind of cheering BJ on.
Very good. So BJ, was this your idea in 2014, the Kickstarter campaign, or where did the idea come from?
Yeah. So, excuse me, I was kind of wrapping up my engineering degree and trying to get an engineering job that wasn't super boring. And so I was trying to get into product design. I was pretty nervous about finding something that was just paperwork all day. So
so now you were afraid of boring. What to you was boring? If you were like, hey, I'm just graduating with my engineering degree, what did that awful scenario look like to you?
It looked like paperwork. Really, just anything that wasn't physically doing something or accomplishing something or building something or designing something. If it wasn't design work or actually making stuff, I was like,
I'm out.
Not super interested.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So avoid the paper bad, doing good.
Yeah. So I wanted to get into product design because kind of like I wanted to influence something in the world. Like if somebody had something that I made and they held it in their hands, like to me, that would be a pretty cool idea. So anyway, I was spending time messing around with a few different products, trying to get some experience so that I could put it on my resume. That, okay, here's BJ, he's an engineer, but he designs products, and maybe there's a product design position for him. So looking around at jobs, there wasn't a whole lot as far as that goes. Engineers don't usually do product design. I didn't know this till after I had my engineering degree. So
the things they didn't tell you in school,
exactly,
you only find out after school.
So I had this idea of a belt, and I said, actually Dave and I were going to school at the same time. We would hang out on the weekends and stuff. And David's a military guy, and he always had military belts. So I was wearing his military belt, and I said, man, I hate leather belts. I really like this military belt, except it's got this big flap and it kind of sticks out under my shirt. So if I could make a military belt that didn't stick out under my shirt and didn't have a flap, that would be my belt. Like I would love that. So I took it as a personal challenge to say, okay, no leather, no holes, no sticking out under my shirt, and no flap hanging out. That seems pretty simple. Like somebody should be able to do that.
Someone should be able to come up with that somewhere.
So I'm actually working on a master's degree in microfluidics, like using the laser from the lab, like making plastic prototypes. And so I made some prototypes, gave some to David, and he said, this is the best belt I've ever had. And I'm not kidding. And normally he's kind of a jerk and he's making fun of me about stuff. So
okay. So you're like, if David's saying this, it's got to be real.
He had gone through several prototypes, and the prototypes that he had before were, before he came to this kind of design, they were good prototypes. I mean, they would have competed well in the marketplace, I would say. But he showed me this, and it was very simple. It was a rather simple strap and a plastic buckle, if I remember right.
Yeah.
But I remember wearing it. I'm like, holy cow! This, as in the military, I'm like, this is what I want for the military. So even from that time on, I started wearing that. It was amazing.
So from there, we kind of got together, me, David, and his brother Winslow, and said, we should start a business maybe around this belt.
Okay.
And then we were all graduating at the same time. Winslow is actually a social worker. So we got a social worker, a lawyer, and an engineer.
This is like the start of a joke, right? This is I'm waiting for the punchline.
Yeah, exactly. Then life comes along and we have bills to pay, and he gets a job in the military as a JAG, and I get a job at a medical place. And it's just like, it all kind of stops the idea as far as like, let's start a business together. But on the sidelines, I'm like, I'm still interested in this thing. Like, I want to have a Kickstarter project and see what happens with it. So kind of on my own, I David gives me a little bit of money. I buy a sewing machine and I'm sewing together some straps and launched the Kickstarter, and timing was pretty good. Kickstarter was kind of like at the peak of its like, kind of like, I don't know, popularity.
Okay, so market penetration, people were thinking, hey.
Yeah,
that
and at the
might be a lot
time,
of
people
fun.
weren't spending a lot of like marketing money on it. It was pretty organic.
Yeah.
So it was the height of the organic stuff happening on Kickstarter.
Mhm.
So I put it out there thinking, okay, I'll probably sell a couple hundred belts. I know I've got family and friends, so there's probably a dozen belts, and maybe I'll get some more, right? So 30 days later, it raises $100,000, and there's about 9,000 belts to make.
And you're like, oh no.
Well, I was going to make them in my garage because I'm like, it's just going to
Sure,
be a
it's-
couple hundred, right? Not a big
That's right.
deal.
That's where everyone starts, in the garage.
So then I'm like, crap, I can't make 9,000, 10,000 belts in my garage. That's
Yep.
a lot of work.
That's a lot of work.
And I got a job and I got kids and I don't have time for this, right? So I started calling around to manufacturers in America because for a long time I'd been thinking about American manufacturing.
Yeah.
Mostly, I don't know if it was because I was poor or what, but like being a poor student and having kids and just being cheap, like I started to notice everything was made in China
Everything.
and everything was crappy.
Mm-hmm.
And I was throwing it away constantly, and things would, I'd buy something and it would break and I'm like, man, this is junk. Then I started thinking, I'm going to find the American made version of this. I'm going to pay a little bit more because I'm tired of this thing breaking. And I would search around for something as simple as like fingernail clippers.
Yep. Good luck with that.
Didn't exist.
Yep.
Like scared me. I'm like, wait a second, this is weird. Like, why don't we make stuff anymore? Then I started digging into it and I'm like, man, manufacturing is the backbone of like economies. And the fact that we are so happy to outsource that is scary to me for our future.
Amen.
And I'm just some little guy. I can't do a whole lot. But guess what? If I ever have a company, I'm making it myself in America because I think there's a strength to that. And if we continue on the path we're going down, it's going to end poorly. So if nothing else, okay, I'm going to start this company. Well, I mean, even a concept. I'm starting the Kickstarter. We're going to make these in America just so I can feel good about sleeping at night, Then all of a sudden there's 9,000 belts and I'm like, okay, I can't do this. That's too many. I'm going to find some American manufacturers though. Yeah. So I start looking around and American manufacturers are just really expensive and they don't want to do a small run.
Yeah.
I was asking for 10,000 belts. That was for them still too small of a run.
Right.
And I'm like, 10,000 is too small. And so their pricing came back basically where I would be losing money on the Kickstarter. I didn't price the belts very well. They were on the cheap side, right?
Okay.
Because I'm thinking I'll be able to do these cheap in my garage.
Right.
So then they all point me to, guess what? We have partners overseas that can do this for you.
Yep.
And I'm like, no, it's not what I'm looking for. So I come away kind of like feeling pretty depressed about the current situation. And it's like, and then people start telling me, if you ever want to be successful, you got to go to China.
Yeah.
You can't do this. People don't do this anymore.
Right.
And I'm like, okay, that's ridiculous.
If
that's true, yeah, if that's true, man, that sucks. And I don't want that to be true. So I'm going to try to fight against that. So, yeah, so I doubled down. David's out of state. Winslow is doing his social work stuff. Actually, he was a delivery driver for some service company. And I'm like, hey, come work with me at night for free in my garage, like 8 hours a night
Like,
after your full-time job,
Good deal.
So he eventually came over and we started working and we spent 6 months working in my garage about 8 hours every night after our full-time jobs. We bought some equipment, a small tumbler, an industrial sewing machine, and we made 10,000 belts. And it was hell. It was hard. So that's kind of how GRIP6 started.
Yeah, over 6 months after doing everything else. And now you're kind of looking at it and saying, okay, we're delivering on what we promised because we did the Kickstarter campaign. We can at least deliver on that. But now I'm sure as you're, because you're 8 hours at night, I'm sure you're dying, but you're also thinking about, oh my gosh, what next? This is going to become viable. You've got to transition this from just a couple of us in the garage to actually making this into a business. So how does that transition take place?
That was the thing that scared me the most at the time, because I thought, okay, Kickstarter was awesome, but you can't continue to do that.
Yeah.
Although some people try, but I don't know. I'm not a big fan of it. So I'm like, okay, we've got to transition somehow from being a garage manufacturing company into a real company. and I have no idea about sales or internet or anything.
Because you've got to market it. It's not just a production
There's
issue.
marketing,
You've got to
there's
have buyers for
photography,
it.
there's videos, there's a lot of stuff, right? And so we had about $20,000 left over. Again, this is like,
That's because everyone worked for free, right?
exactly. If we were to pay ourselves, we would have been in the hole. So I calculated it, and I think I was making something like $10 an hour.
Genius. Everybody should do this.
My wife wasn't super excited. So I'm like, I have no idea anything about marketing. I've got $20,000. I'm going to find online like the most legitimate marketing company in Utah that I can find. So I did a lot of research, and I found a company that was not too far away from my house. Went and talked to them. They had these beautiful offices. They made these websites that were just incredible looking. And I got a quote from them, and it was going to be $30,000. I was like, okay, I've got 20, so we can start the payments now. So let's do this. So let's go full blown, all the way in, jumping into the deep end of the pool. So we start paying them money, and on the side, me and Winslow were going to like the Utah State Fair, West Jordan Days, like in Provo on the 4th of July, like selling every weekend.
Anywhere there's a group of people.
Yeah.
You're like,
we get a tent. We've got belts, and people walk by and they're like, what is this? Let's show you our belt, right? So we'd make like $1,000 or $2,000 a weekend, which was enough to continue to pay the marketing company this $30,000 amount. By the time it ends, this is like a year later, we have a website that's pretty, but it's not fast. And they don't actually know how to get market, like they don't know how to drive customers there. Our sales were like 0 almost. And I'm like talking to the guy, like, what are you guys good at? Like, because you're supposed to be the best. And he's like, we're really good at email marketing. And I'm like, email marketing means I already found the customers and you're milking them again a second time for another sale. That is not useful.
Yeah.
So we ended up firing them and being out all this money. And now we're kind of back in the situation of, what do we do now?
No money, got a website,
yeah,
not a sales pipeline.
So one of the upsides to the Kickstarter was a lot of the people that got their belts loved them. And that kind of surprised me. I mean, not surprised me, but I was surprised at how, because they didn't look great. I mean, like we're melting them on this hand melter. They were rough. By standards of today, they look like garbage, like compared to our belts now. But people liked them. The concept was there.
And they were fully functional.
They functioned well.
Kept the pants up.
Yeah.
All right.
But they didn't, like, the edges weren't super smooth. The anodizing wasn't the best, things like that, right? But anyway, just putting up a rough website while we were waiting for the fancy one to be put up, we were having a little bit of sales just from leftover Kickstarter, people wanting more. So then we're kind of in the situation where we don't know what to do on the marketing side. We just wasted $30,000 in almost a full year. Winslow happened to know another small company that had done a Kickstarter and figured out how to do Facebook advertising afterwards.
Okay.
So they came over and they said, it's actually not that hard. Let us show you how to do it. So they start showing us, and it's a bit overwhelming. And I'm like, this is kind of complicated. So they said, well, how about this? We'll just do it for you and we'll take a cut. I'm like, okay, that sounds good. And immediately sales like just came in.
Took off.
We were doing something like $5,000 a month in sales. And then the first month that they had it, it was $90,000.
Yeah, that's a bit of a scope of scale there. I mean, that's about a 20x.
Early 2016.
Yeah.
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 So they were still working full-time jobs. Both BJ and Winslow had, continue to work full-time jobs for those 2 years.
And you're still in a JAG course, so you're.
I'm out of state. I'm just talking. My connection at this time is talking to BJ and
he's on the phone
cheerleading, basically.
Go guys, go guys.
Just like living vicariously there. So.
So anyway, this company ends up just really increasing our sales, and it was like, okay, this is enough to quit our jobs. So we quit our jobs, and then really had to ramp the manufacturing because that was actually pretty tough. And we're working with hand tools and lots of labor, and it's not very efficient, right?
You are.
Anyway, about 6 months of that, and our visions on what the future looked like were starting to diverge. The company was kind of doing clickbaity stuff that wasn't really good brand building, and it was getting close to Christmas time, and I had it with them, because every time we had a discussion where I said, we've got to get better, like better pictures, better video.
Yeah.
They were like, no, let's just push this hard because it could end at any minute. And I'm like, that's not how you build a company. So we can't do this. So we ended up firing him. And I spent about a week getting on Facebook and relearning everything that they were doing and understanding it. And probably for 3 or 4 months, I was running it myself, and we did just fine. Turns out that, like, you don't have to be super intelligent. You can just be kind of a normal person with some problem solving skills, and you can figure out how to do online advertising.
How long did it take from, like, you're like, okay, I'm going to do this myself. How long did it take before you were actually successful?
So I spent 40 hours, like a solid week, in Facebook on the back end. We never saw a dip or anything. It was because we'd had some stuff that was already kind of like rolling. I kept it going. And then I hired a guy that was a math major from Utah State. And I said, let me show you everything I know. Now go do better. And he did. He was awesome. Not a marketing guy in any way.
And specifically, purposefully not a marketing guy.
Because of our marketing experience with that other company.
Okay.
Yeah.
But understood numbers, understood algorithms, understood.
Yeah, it was mostly number crunching. And he was actually a statistics guy. So that worked perfectly.
Yeah.
That's great.
So that's kind of how we got our start. And so from there, it's like in-house manufacturing and in-house advertising. And those things, being able to grow them at the same time is pretty important, because if your manufacturing gets awesome and you can't sell them, you got a lot of inventory, and that's not good. If you're selling like crazy and you can't make it, you're out of stock, and it's not good because you're wasting money on ads. So
that's right.
You got to do this like fine balance of kind of growing them at the same time.
And so what framework, how did you accomplish that? Because they're, folks watching this are thinking to themselves, okay, sounds great. Sounds great, looking retrospectively, but when you're in the moment trying to figure out what is next, and you've got limited time, you've got limited resources, how are you going to invest that? How did you manage to keep both of them working at the same time? Because you're right, without the sales, it's worthless to make something with that, but if you make something and can't sell it, it doesn't work either.
Yeah.
I would say, as we've grown, and we've grown steadily every year, and pretty quickly in some years, right? But we try to keep growth down to something manageable so it doesn't kill us. But a
mere 100% a year. Let's try and keep it down to that, right?
we probably averaged 60% to 70% for a year. With last year, during year of COVID was the biggest. We doubled, but we try to be about 50%. That's what our attempt is 50% growth, because we can handle that.
And some people are thinking that's just crazy growth, right? I'm struggling with the 8% growth, or man, I'd love to have growth. Some people are thinking about like that, and so they're tuning into this thinking, man, alive, I'd love to see. 50% sounds wonderful.
That's interesting, because it kind of depends on where you're coming from. If you're a manufacturer who retails, which is what we consider ourselves, we're manufacturers first. We've talked about this in our philosophy of who we are. We're manufacturers. And so that's where we spend our time. And then we retail. So that means marketing and creative. We have our own creative team. We have a videographer and graphic designer. We have our marketing team. We vertically integrate, and we do as much as we possibly can in-house. But all of that is an extension of manufacturing. But manufacturing, the problem is there's a lot of friction between those things. There's a 50% growth rate is a good growth rate. But let's say there's a retailer and they go to China. A 50% growth rate is okay. They could have 400% growth rate. That might be what they're looking for. As a manufacturer, you think of lower growth rates because you're limited by your own capacity to grow, not some nebulous factory in China's capacity to grow, because it's like a collection of 50 factories that does your stuff, right? But so anyway, I guess addressing that 50% growth, that's been difficult, especially from the point of view of a manufacturer, because it means constant pressure on the system.
Yes.
Yeah.
And no opportunity to become super efficient in the system either. And so the reason that's okay is because as a retailer, your margins are so much higher than as a manufacturer on average, I would say, from our experience in any case.
Because you're going direct to market.
Yeah, you're cutting out middlemen.
You're cutting out the middleman.
And you're taking their margin.
Exactly.
Which you're spending, honestly, a lot of that on marketing costs.
You're reinvesting that to keep the marketing going, to keep everything else going. At the same time that you've got production team, and you're trying to grow the production team, you're trying to make sure you're bringing in the right people, so you're trying to juggle all these balls.
Yeah,
exactly.
And then like we'll have, David was mentioning this earlier, we have marketing meetings and stuff, and the marketers are just like, let's go for these people and let's make this video, and it's like very open-ended, very like fun. And then we get into production meeting and the production people are like, this machine's broken, that machine's broken. Are you kidding me? We have to make all this stuff. What about this? What about that? And then it's like getting into problem solving mode of like, okay, let's make sure production can handle, the other side. So
It's true. And
there is that friction and some of that, like, and there has been a lot of times where our production is not capable because there was a machine down or there's a supply shortage, and we got to tell the marketers, pull it back. We can't do it right now.
I know those of you who are watching are thinking, wait a minute, these guys are talking about there's actual conflict between sales and marketing. I know that's a shock, and I'm glad that you were tuned in to hear it here, because that's almost always the folks on the production end are thinking, oh, I can't believe what sales is doing to me, or especially, if we're doing the end of the month sale or end of the quarter, then I'm just jammed out in production. And sales folks are, have the mindset, I'll promise the world, and whatever happens is, their problem down there. So, trying to bring all that together in one umbrella and say, no, this actually, to make us all work together, we all actually have to work together to make that happen.
Yeah,
it is hard. We've had a lot of, I would say, friction, not really too much contention. I think pressure, for sure.
Lots of pressure.
Because especially for, again, we're a small manufacturing company, but we consider ourselves a manufacturing company. We have about 75 employees and 8 engineers, and those engineers are constantly working, and we have machinists and in any case, that pressure and that friction exists. But one thing that is, I think, key is willingness to take risk, like being okay with that pressure, and understanding that it is a different business in retail than manufacturing.
Yeah. Now, our main topic here, we're definitely talking about marketing and how that evolves. But since we're at this point right here, a lot of the folks who are watching this also have workforce and workforce development challenges. How do I get team members? How do I keep team members? Let's just hold on to that theme for just a minute and talk to us about, the team. How do we find and keep the team to keep us going? What lessons have you guys learned through your challenges?
That is a major challenge, and I can see everybody having problems with that. So there's been a couple of things that we've learned over the few years that we've been doing it. We don't pay top dollar for production. In fact, our other business partner, Winslow, who kind of is the hiring person for all production, is always like, we don't pay enough. We need to pay more. I can't get people. So we're not like paying people gobs of money to do our production. We're probably on the lower end, to be honest. When we first started GRIP6, we couldn't afford to do insurance for anybody because we weren't making enough money. And so one of the things we would do is we'd provide lunches on Fridays, and we'd be like, let's grab a grill, let's throw it outside. We're doing hot dogs or hamburgers every Friday. And then, sometimes we'd go out to lunch or we'd go to whatever. And it was kind of the small perk for a small team to say, let's get together and let's have fun and let's enjoy working together.
So interpersonal relationships.
Yeah,
that was
to
a
some
strategy
degree.
to say, hey, let's at least form some relationships here.
As time went on, we ended up switching it to every other Friday, and we got insurance. And so it was like, it became kind of a tradition at GRIP6 to just like get the entire company together and let people, the production people and the engineers and the marketers all kind of sit together and eat and get to know each other. So that's been one small thing. Another thing that David actually came probably 2018. Is that when you really, when he finished his JAG stuff, he came over in 2018. We probably had something like 20 employees at the time.
Okay. Yeah.
As we were growing and getting more and more employees, David was actually pretty critical in kind of helping us establish like the right culture. And so one of the main things with that was like empowering people at the lowest level to have like the ability to make the decisions. If you're a production person, you actually should have quite a bit of responsibility on what's happening, what's being done, and that kind of thing. There's something else.
I actually think that's important to be able to, the flexibility that is required in modern manufacturing. And the key to that is having employees who are able to be flexible and able to make changes and are okay with that pressure because they've internalized it as their own desire, right? And so the problem is with manufacturing, and we'd love to give pretty jobs. We'd love to give jobs that require a lot of intelligence or
stimulating,
fulfilling jobs.
Yeah.
That's our goal, right? But to some degree, but when you're doing production, it's about system, it's about process, about doing the same thing, exactly the same thing over and over and over again.
We have a lot of really boring production jobs. I mean, there's some things that are just mind-numbingly boring, and so that's just how it goes sometimes.
Yeah. So as much as we possibly can, we push decisions to the lowest level hierarchy possible, to the action officer. That's a military. That's something I pulled over from the military. The military is actually not very good at it, to be honest with you, in my opinion. But the principle, I think, is critical, and that is that whoever is taking the action should make the decision if at any time. And in fact, I'm pretty militant. If BJ's making decisions, it isn't good. It isn't good that BJ's making the decisions, or I'm making decisions. It should be team leads and team leads and managers at, and by doing that, I think you have a lot of different things that happen. Number one is that your workforce is happier because they're more fulfilled. They get to make decisions. They get to think through things. Maybe not everybody, but they have an opportunity to grow into that pretty quickly at our company. And it also means that when changes come, they're more ready to make the changes. They're not fighting against the system, right? They're not like, this is the system, and entrenched bureaucracy happens in companies, right? Almost immediately. And if you can, the way to attack that is to have fewer systems as possible by having people make decisions. And so that goes into some maybe too deep of philosophy.
One of the other things that we do as far as workforce is we have a really flexible schedule. It drives our production managers crazy. They hate it, and they complain to us about it a lot. But it's important. Like you have to be flexible. So we're able to get high school students and college students kind of work around schedules. And to a large degree, we question a lot of how typical business is done. So if it's like, you're 6 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. on a production shift, we don't do that. For the people that want to, we say, okay, the earliest person's coming in at 6, the latest person's leaving at midnight. If you want to find a shift in there somewhere and you can be productive during that time, that's fine. We'll be flexible. So it's hard with the scheduling, but it makes it more appealing for people that don't want to just be stuck in a specific spot.
Okay, so sounds like some of the key takeaways to me were make sure that there's flexibility on the scheduling. Flexibility has helped. Also, the notion about pushing responsibility and decision making down as far as you can, and not just on the theoretical level, but in a practical level to make sure people are actually able to do that.
The other thing that we do, and this is not have so much have to do with morale, but maybe the main theme here is we never, if someone makes an argument that this is the way it's done, we don't allow that argument, right? So we're always looking at things from our own context, and not relying on just because some of the business does it this way, right? Doesn't mean that it's right. I think a lot of times people get trapped in that mentality and can't move forward because of it. So we don't allow it.
Very good. Don't get stuck into the way things always used to be. Let's think about how can we make things better. Even
ourselves 6 months ago or a year ago, it's not an argument,
So I'm a huge Elon Musk fanboy. I mean, the fact that he's an engineer and he's like one of the most successful people in the history of the world is like, to me, like personally really fulfilling, right? I'm like,
another challenge. Challenge accepted.
So one of the things that he talks about is, and he's mostly talking about like rocket design, but it applies to business, where he says everything's wrong. It's just the degree to which it is wrong. So if you can kind of look at life that way, it's not like, so you could look at your product and go, okay, there's something wrong about it, meaning we could make it cheaper, faster, higher quality, which we strive to do on a pretty regular basis. But you could also pull that over to your actual business and say, okay, the business, I mean, it's wrong to some degree. Let's find the places where it's wrong. And maybe some of those things are just standard business practice that just, it never got questioned because it's just kind of always been done that way. And so those are kind of some of the things that we try to keep an eye on.
So keep in mind that things can always be better, and just accepting things the way they are isn't going to work for us, because we've got to make sure that there's opportunity to improve it down the road. And so it's just, things are wrong, but let's make it less wrong today.
Yeah, exactly. Small steps to make it less wrong.
Yeah. And which are, some of the driving principles behind continuous improvement from Toyota are all about accepting small, continuous, incremental improvements over the course of time.
Yep.
I love it. So from the back on marketing as we're looking at the company growing and what it's doing. So what are some of the, we've talked about some of the early on stumbles. How have we learned from those stumbles, and how do you apply that today? So what does online marketing look like today for GRIP6?
Sure. I guess it looks different every day. I don't know, not every day, but it changes pretty rapidly. When BJ kind of took that over and it was like 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
2016.
Yeah.
It was Facebook. Facebook was king, and it was probably 95% of our sales were coming from Facebook. Is that about right?
Yeah.
We still built out our brick and mortar. We had a wholesale department. It was a skinny department, but it was there. And Facebook for 3 years was really the king. And then
so this was drop shipping then. So we're getting an order through Facebook and drop shipping.
Yeah. So we'd have our marketer guy who was this math guy, became a marketing genius, at least close to genius. I don't know. He got really good at it, and that's what he does now. Yeah, he might. And he started his own company as well when he left GRIP6. So he liked what the reign he was given, the free reign, and his numbers, and he crunched numbers, and that's what he did. So what he wasn't trying to look, as a small company or someone who's beginning in manufacturing, one of the pieces of advice we give is if you can start small. And that's the flexibility you have as a manufacturer, is that you can start small, especially if it's not already your bread and butter, right? If it's something that you want to test, that's what we would say is start with something you can test and then continue to test, and always thinking of it as a test. One thing that we did that was a problem for us is that we relied too much on Facebook. Now that didn't hurt us too bad because we knew it early enough. We knew that we couldn't get in, that at some point Facebook was going to die and we had to find other channels. And so we continue to test, Pinterest. We've had tons of tests on Pinterest. It's never worked for us, but that's because of our product, and it has a lot to do with the demographics of people who actually want them, but Pinterest and Snapchat and TikTok and YouTube and Google and 10 or 20 other ones that we jumped into, email marketing, and we tested everything.
So constantly shifting through different social media, conducting experiments, what's going to work, what's not going to work.
That's probably one of the more uncomfortable things for, I would say, a normal manufacturer, if they were getting into this, would be, it's not the same thing every day. I mean, 5 years ago, it was all Facebook, and now it's like a lot of different things. And to be honest, like Apple does some update on their iOS and it wrecks the ads, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, everything's really expensive. And so it's like, okay, we got another problem to face. How do we change, and how do we go from there?
But there's a positive to being a manufacturer, even in this year. So iOS, I don't know how many people know about this, but Apple came out with some privacy updates in one of their updates, and it basically, I wouldn't say killed Facebook and Google and different algorithms that exist, but it killed the ability to track data or nearly kill it, to track data and be able to provide ads to the right people at the right time. That's what you want to do. That's the genius behind Facebook, is that they know where to put your product, and they did a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
So and it was a boon for a long time. But being a manufacturer, we were able to this year make adjustments that kept us alive. And even though this has been a harder year, especially during the summer after the new updates came out and online marketing changed, the landscape changed, and it's still continuing to change. But we were set up, number one, is because we had the testing philosophy that we were constantly testing. But as a manufacturer, we were set up well because we were able to, our margins are healthier, for one thing. And so our marketing budget could be higher. And our maneuverability was so much better than it would have been if we would have had a 6 week or 3 month or 6 month order time frame through China or another country, right? We were able to make those adjustments, minute adjustments. And one thing we did was we did a manufacturer's second sale, which we'd never done before. And because of that, we actually were able to thrive through the summer and continue to grow.
So it sounds to me like a couple of lessons so far. Number one, from a media standpoint, we've got to constantly test. We can't be satisfied with what we did yesterday, because we know if social media is one of our vehicles, we know it's going to change, and it constantly does. Not just the providers of social media, but the algorithms within each provider change over time. And so you've built up a culture to be able to be nimble and experiment and see what's working, what's not working,
and be uncomfortable.
And accept that. That's just part of new business. It isn't just, back in the, traditional manufacturing usually thinks of, sales as a retail outlet problem. I'm going to take skinnier margins because I'm going to make lots of something. I'm going to get it to a retailer. It's their problem to sell it. I just need the orders from the retailers, and then I'm good to go. And by taking that, middle person out of it, you capture bigger margins, but you also have to increase your ability as a manufacturing company to be able to wrap your arms around things like social media. And the upside, because you're also the manufacturer, then you're able to be nimble on that end as well. To be able to not carry a lot of inventory. You're not shipping, you're not putting an order in China that takes 3 months to get here, and then a great big order, and then you've got to sell all of that. So you're kind of bypassing all of that in favor of the flexibility.
Yeah, exactly.
When that happens, then going back to that growth of keeping our manufacturing and our marketing teams growing in tandem with one another, what kind of challenges does that pose from looking at it from the marketing standpoint? So now you've got, what did you say, 8 team members who were focused on creating that. What kind of friction does that create within the company between the marketing and the production? Are there times when you don't feel like people are on the same page? Are there times when issues come up and it's a real challenge in order to work through those?
I think the friction mostly exists between manufacturing capacity and vision, and as far as like what the push is on retail, on what we're creating and we want to push out. There hasn't been a lot of friction between, like, let's say the engineering department or the marketing or creative department. The marketing department, and I don't know if it's how we've built it, or I don't know if it's we've employed specific types of marketers, right? People who are looking to, I don't know, that's a cliche, but think outside the box, to be uncomfortable and to test things. And I think the marketers are, I don't know, it's interesting. Maybe that's just the personalities we have, but they're okay with the rate of change that we've kind of, that we constantly push. I would even say that some of them want it to be a little slower. And the engineers, to be honest, and this, I know this entirely has to do with the kinds of engineers that BJ grabs and keeps. They love the challenge of creating something new, and so I haven't seen any friction.
Change isn't the challenge.
No, because change, in fact, my oldest engineer has been there 5 years. We just had his 5-year annual thing, and so we were talking about when we first got hired, we're in 1,000 square feet, and he's starting to take over my stuff because I was the lone engineer for a long time, and all the manual stuff we had at that time. And now we've got robots doing machining, and we've got lasers and grainers and tumblers and injectional machines and sock knitting machines and like so much more stuff. And we were talking, and I said, what, like, is that weird to you, like going from this tiny little company with 6 people to now there's, 75 or 80, and we've got all kinds of stuff, and he's my lead engineer and he manages all the engineers. And he's like, no, it's just always been that way. It's just everything is always changing. Change. So nobody's ever gotten into all right, we're in the groove, let's hang out here. That's that's never happened at GRIP6.
In fact, he said, we asked him, like, does this seem like a different company than it did, in 4 years ago? He's like, it's a different company than it was a year ago.
That's true. Yeah.
He's like 5 years.
It's 5 different companies in that time.
Yeah, exactly. Now, a lot of folks who are watching this are very good at manufacturing. They think of themselves as a manufacturer. I make widgets.
Yeah.
And but many of them don't really think of themselves as a marketing company,
right?
Or to kind of have that expertise or challenges. If you were to give some advice to someone who says, "Hey, we're a great manufacturer and we want to get better at marketing," what are some of the things they need to look out for? What are some of the things that they need to evaluate so they can become a better marketing company, not just a good manufacturing company?
It's a little bit of a, I mean, it's a challenge. It's not super easy. In fact, I was thinking about this. I was trying to think about this as realistically as possible. We used to use a small company down in Orem who did all of our laser cutting and bending and graining and that kind of thing. And I remember talking to the owner, and he was like, "Yeah, stuff comes through all the time. Some of the darndest stuff. I'm making stuff for people, and I think this will never work. And then all of a sudden, I'm making 10,000, and they're selling like hotcakes. And this little company is doing amazing." And he's like, "You guys are that same way. Just I'm making hundreds of thousands of belts every year, and it's like, holy cow." Um, so as far as like starting your own product, that's the thing. You've got capabilities, certain capabilities, whether it's injection molding or steel fabrication or something, right? Our recommendation would be really to probably start small, to look. I mean, there's 8 billion people in this world. There's a lot of needs. And if there's something that you can find that you can do, and you can do it pretty well, it might require getting somebody who's a little bit more, like hiring somebody that might be good at like making the product look nice, or maybe getting somebody who does know how to run ads on Amazon or something. But we recommend starting small, jumping into something simple like Amazon, testing it out. As it's doing good, put more into it, test other things. And do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. Basically what you said, but the key there, the key to it all is using your strength as a manufacturer, because if you inject I mean, you're the manufacturer. So from production to retail, you're at the most difficult point of that cycle or line. So you're in a position of a lot of power and strength, especially, and not especially, in contrast to the old market that existed even just 20 years ago. I mean, even 10 years ago, it was a very different market than it is today. How much of it is online? Something I just read, something like 95% of people do their shopping online. Now they end up spending a lot of money brick and mortar, but online is where the action is happening as far as like the decision making and whatnot. And so because the landscape is completely different than it was 20 years ago, in my opinion, I think manufacturers are more and more going to go into the retail space because wholesalers don't have the power they did 20 years ago. The connections between manufacturing and the retailer are almost gone. And the paper thin kind of like sheet that exists there is understanding online marketing, but it's not a huge gap.
Of all the things that we do, manufacturing is obviously the hardest. Like, it's harder than marketing. It's harder than product design. I mean, manufacturing is like, that's the heavy lifting. So if you can do that, these other things aren't like insurmountable.
It's a very interesting perspective, because I talk to a lot of folks and they usually see it the opposite. They're like, hey, this, manufacturing is what I know, it's what I understand. And it's the mindset of, I'm comfortable with what I know and what I understand. I'm uncomfortable with what I don't know and what I don't understand. And so what I'm hearing is that it is possible. You can get into it. You can learn it. You don't have to, be necessarily an expert, but you can approach this from whatever background you have. Really learn marketing from a standpoint where you can apply it and make it actionable for your business. Another area where I think a lot of manufacturers are uncomfortable with is just e-commerce in and of itself.
Yeah.
And so, marketing is one thing. Hey, I'm going to go market in this platform or that platform, but now I've got to build a storefront where I'm actually, doing transactions and I'm selling directly to the marketplace. I'm cutting out that retail. And some of them approach that from the trepidation of, well, I'm already selling to retail, and so are my retailers going to be upset if I'm also selling it direct to market? What would you guys say to that? Do you consider that a problem? I know that retail isn't necessarily your thing, but if you're in retail and now we're trying to go direct to customer, how would you address that challenge?
So it exists already. It's not, and we deal with different manufacturers, and a lot of times they have their own lines, whether they deal with it in what we think is a powerful way or not. Like in socks, we deal with, two of the big main companies in wool production have their own sock lines and produce wool for other people. And so I know that at least in that industry, it's not uncommon for you to have your own retail. And I think that's probably somewhat common in manufacturing, and it's going to get more common. So it may be something scary. Now, I guess what we're saying is that to bridge the gap between manufacturing and retail is the shortest gap that's ever existed. And that it's a good opportunity, but it's not just a good opportunity, in my opinion, and I haven't talked to you about this too much, but in my opinion, it's going to be critical. It's going to be something maybe necessary within the next 20 to 30 years because that gap is going to continue to shrink. And I also think because of how manufacturing happens is going to change. It's going to become maybe more boutique in some areas, and you're going to have to, the competition is going to be no longer going to be big retailers, it's going to be other manufacturers, and that's anyway, competition is going to change. So I think it's going to be necessary.
So to add to that, there are tools now that even didn't exist 5 years ago. Shopify.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that alone is like, oh, you want a website? Do Shopify. It's super simple. It's really inexpensive.
Very
you can
easy.
be online and your stuff looks good. It's really robust. It's super easy.
You could do that in the morning.
Exactly.
That's one employee. I mean, that's one employee that does Shopify and handles Amazon. And there are people looking to be that employee.
Right.
Yeah.
So I would say on top of that, I just had a thought, but I lost it. But so you got the tools that make it like.
Yeah, that didn't exist.
Yeah, that are so much easier than ever existed in the past. Here's the other part of it. Plus, you've got a story. If you're a manufacturer, you take videos of you making the thing and you're trying to make it better. I mean, that's largely what we do. It's like when people come by GRIP6 and they take a tour, they walk away with their jaws open like, holy cow, I had no idea it took this to make a belt, a really simple belt. Again, we've got injection mold machines and lasers and robots and people doing all kinds of stuff. And they're like, man, I would never have expected it. And so you can use that kind of content in your videos, things like that, because that's a deeper story than I bought this in China. I put a logo on it and now it's, now it's what? It's everything else. It's most companies today. This is what manufacturers need to understand. Most companies today are glorified marketing companies. They buy stuff from China. They put it on their website, they put a logo on it, and they do marketing.
They repackage it.
That's all they're doing.
And sell it out.
If you're the manufacturer and you do the same thing, your margins are so much bigger and your story's so much deeper. And consumers care about that stuff.
And there's a reason that they are afraid. The truth is you are going to ruffle feathers. There's going to be friction there. And the reason is because you've gained a lot of power and they see that, and your ability to grow and knock them out is high. There's a reason they're scared.
But to kind of counter that, one of the other things that we've noticed this year, our wholesale department, which basically sells to retailers, for wholesale pricing, it's bigger than it's ever been. And I think part of that is the groundswell of GRIP6. I mean, people are starting to go like kind of in a regular basis. Oh yeah, I've seen GRIP6 somewhere. I've heard of it. I've got one, whatever. So now when you go to retail, it's like, oh yeah, they've already done the hard work. They've done the heavy lifting, which is get the name out there. Now that somebody sees in a retail store, they're like, oh yeah, I've seen it online before. And so it's not really like, are you going to take my share or my share? It's like together, you're both going to kind of rise all tides,
Love it. Love it. Great conversation. Let's wrap up and give you the last words. What other advice, anything else that we haven't talked about today that you would really like to share with the manufacturing community? Words of wisdom, lessons learned that we haven't already talked about.
Well, I don't know about lessons learned. One thing I do want to get out is if we're always looking for other manufacturers that want to get into retail or are doing retail and to either collaborate or help or, do something, something that helps both of us, because we'd love to support this type of manufacturing in the United States in general, but in specific Utah. So if you guys have specific questions, you guys want to come by GRIP6 and chat about a collaboration, or even if you want our help. I talked to my marketing team today and I said, hey, if we're going to call you guys out and say, I'm going to make you guys available. So if you have questions that are specific, you can come by and we'll even let you pick our marketing team's brains about it.
Love it. Oh, that's great.
We're extremely open. The real goal of GRIP6 isn't just to become, the biggest belt company in the world or anything. In fact, we don't want to be a belt company. We want to be known as kind of like the American manufacturing success story. And obviously those are ambitious goals and we could be laughed at by many large manufacturers. But the truth is, our ultimate goal is like, it is manufacturing. It's getting to that point where we're not sending everything overseas automatically and nobody even questions it
Mhm.
to where it's like, wait a second, no, we can do boutique stuff, we can do small stuff, we can do customized stuff, and to maintain kind of like the integrity and the I don't know, the skill set that Americans used to have of, you know, tooling and machining and all kinds of stuff, really is to push manufacturing as a country, and not like in a nationalistic way, but kind
Yeah.
of like as a, let's maintain our independence, let's be strong, and let's not let important valuable things kind of just go by the wayside.
It's
So
a strategic decision.
Yeah.
Let's be
Absolutely.
strategic about how we do this,
Yeah.
because what we
Exactly
know
right.
is that manufacturing actually gives birth to a lot of other companies because of what we make. And
Exactly.
so it's you know, actually making something does matter.
we would feel super successful if we were some small part in increasing American manufacturing in any way.
Yeah.
Love it. Love it. Thank you for being here, David, BJ. Really appreciate it. Thanks
Yeah.
for telling us the story about GRIP6 and the experiences there. And thank you for all of you who've joined us for Track C. Thank you. And please continue. We'll have more this afternoon. So thank you for being here.